Good afternoon, Jant. I'm so happy to welcome you to our weekly podcast in which we shed light on several interesting topics in the energy sector from oil, natural gas, energy transition, and renewables. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about a very interesting topic titled Energy Transition, the challenging scenarios from fossils to renewables. By the way, it's a delight to host Svetlana Tretiakova. She is a senior analyst in Rystad Energy. Good afternoon, good morning, Svetlana. Welcome on board.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure is all mine. Fossil energies have been for decades the locomotive of the global economy, but lately we get a lot of pressure to reduce their environmental impact, especially when talking about carbon emissions. Amid the progress of investment in renewables, we started to hear about peak oil. In your opinion, what's the long-term trajectory of oil demand and when is it the peak oil?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been hearing this term about peak oil for over probably 10, 15 years, and we still haven't reached it, right? So the short answer, it's unlikely we're going to see it short term. And more likely scenarios that we're going to see plateau rather than actual peak oil. So in the next 2-3 years, the global oil demand is going to plateau and is going to stay this way for about 5-8 years. Again, it depends on the country and depends on the region as well, but the global demand is going to grow short term, and it's going to pretty much stabilize for the next 10 years. So we're not expecting to see so-called peak oil anymore, but we're going to see the growth.
Yeah, exactly, because many economies rely on oil and natural gas and even coal in their renaissance, I think in their progress development. And you could just give example of India, for example, China, United States. So these countries are relying on oil and gas and even coal. So I think, yeah, this is a very interesting question and topic, and all time everybody is talking about the peak oil.
Yeah, exactly. And why it's so hard to decarbonize the oil industry, right? So if we look at the different sectors in different segments of oil demand, we see currently a lot of challenges. So in fact, if we look at the transportation sector, only passenger vehicles is the sector where we see transition happening. And that's penetration of EV vehicles. But is it the case for entire world? No, that's not. We see China driving EV penetration, and that's because of the subsidies, that's because of infrastructure and other investments. What about the rest of the world? And the US, for example, is the leader of global oil demand, but also the key consumer for passenger vehicles, right? But here we have the challenges. So the EV passenger vehicles in the US cost much more than ICE vehicle. First. Second, where do you charge your car? Right? It's either public station or it's your garage. And how many people have availability of their personal home garage? Right? So in the US, this number is about 60%, but the rest of the world is far behind. And finally, public infrastructure, right? So in most of the countries, we see the large number of cars per one charging station. So that also creates additional challenges. So not only the cost of the vehicle itself, but infrastructure possesses additional challenges in energy transition. And this is actually the sector that transitions at the fastest rate, right? So if we look at the other sectors, and if we look at, let's say, trucks, aviation, maritime, right? So lithium ion batteries is not a good solution for those sectors because of the size of the battery required, and that would reduce the profit and reduce the size of goods that the, let's say, shipping cargo can transport or the truck can transport. So that's why we currently don't have a viable solution. There are some alternatives. It's, for example, for the trucks, it could be solid state batteries, but there are still high costs associated with production. There are scalability issues. So it's not a short-term solution. That's
Yeah,
why
exactly.
oil is going to stick in pretty much all the transportation sectors, except for maybe few ones, such as buses and rails that are seeing electrification at faster rates.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say something very important in mind.
Yeah.
The electricity generated in India, 80% is coming from coal. So if
Mhm.
you are driving EV car in India,
Yeah.
you have the chance to charge your car 80% from electricity generated from coal. In this case, the diesel car is more environmentally friendly compared to the one you are driving in India. So this is, I think, challenging issue we are living today. But
Mhm.
even for rich countries, the countries they have the capability to invest more, it's very costly for them because we are living international or a global economic crisis. So it's a little bit difficult to find that investment, that large scale investment to the EVs on decarbonization or energy transition. So let me go to the second part and let me take something I think is very interesting. So renewables, we know that renewables don't emit carbon, but the process to build their equipment require oil and gas and natural gas. So more than that, from renewables, we get only electricity. Is it the reason why it's hard to replace oil?
Good question. It's one of the reasons, right? So again, like when we look at the like overall emissions and like overall like energy transition scenarios, so it's good to look in terms of total energy mix, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When we look at oil, okay, we can follow one trajectory where we are maybe, displacing oil at fast rate, while some other sources such as coal, right, you mentioned, or natural gas, the share is actually growing. So in that case, are we achieving the desired trajectory? Probably no.
Oil is not only a source of energy, but many forget that oil is a source of petrochemistry, and all what we have, rubber, plastic, ethylene are surrounding us are coming from oil. So if we stop the investment in oil and gas, which will be a big mistake, if we stop investment, we are going to stop the production of let's say, the production of the petrochemistry, which really the backbone of many industries. Even if you go the cars, the aviation, we need the plastic because plastic is light. So even in the aviation, they need everything light. And for the cars to reduce the weight of the car, of the vehicle, and it's, I think it's very important to keep at least investing in oil, but investing in oil, that doesn't mean that we are going to burn that oil. Investing in oil
Yeah.
means also that we are going to decarbonize and we are shift. The number I have, the global oil we have in the planet, we are using only 15% in petrochemistry. This percentage, we have to work on it. Let's say increase it to 20, 30, 40, 50, why not more? And at the end of the day, we participate to add value to developing countries in the petrochemistry. But on the other hand, we can develop maybe some renewables to replace the combustion of oil, and by the way, we can reduce emissions. The other thing I have in
Yeah, and
mind.
like if I can add a few more points, right? So regarding petrochemical sector, yeah, it's good that you mentioned that like petrochemical or plastic production is not directly associated with emissions, right? Or with burning. We don't burn oil to
Yes.
produce plastic, at least for feedstock. There are obviously associated emissions with the production, which can be reduced and which can be replaced with alternative sources. But the main chunk of oil that is used to produce plastic, and plastic is associated with economic growth of each of the countries, it doesn't just have alternatives yet,
Yeah.
right? So first of all, there is no feedstock alternatives, and second, the recycling rates are still very low, right? So in that case, we pretty much compared to uncertainties with like transportation sector, in petrochemical industry, the situation is pretty clear. So the demand is just going to grow,
Yeah.
right? But that is not necessarily means increasing emissions, right? It means still growing the like economic growing economies and also
Yeah,
like
that's why. Yeah, exactly. That's why we have to keep investing in both in oil and gas, and we know how to use them. And we keep investing in the renewables because with the renewables we can replace the oil and gas we are using in combustion on burning. So that's why we can save, we can reach our target neutrality of carbon. The second thing I have in mind, another question is that the International Energy Agency and OPEC Plus are both don't align on demand growth. Assuming demand continues growing, do you think that we are investing enough to ensure those supplies?
Yeah, that's again a good question because, well, first of all, if we stop investing, we are going to uh, have much less supply even to meet fastest transition scenarios. This is certain. Again, based on the on different demand scenario, and we are somewhere in the middle between OPEC and IEA numbers, right? We still need to continue investing in oil, and especially when we talk about slower transition scenarios, those are the ones actually when we need some additional resources to be discovered, right? So we have certain amount of resources currently discovered and just need, some investments in them, while some others, they need additional investment in exploration and in discovery. And based on the demand and available supply, that would drive the price much higher. So the break-even price will become higher. And in slower transition scenarios, in order to meet the higher demand, we need to make, let's call it uncommercial reserves. We need to make them commercial, right? So the price is just going to grow in those cases. And that's why we need to start investing now to ensure energy security. And while I guess the correct statement would be we need to invest in both. We need to continue investing in oil while we investing in alternative energies, alternative solutions. That way, countries can develop at their own
And yeah,
pace.
and it's a realistic. Yeah, and it's very realistic to keep investing in both because it's realistic to manage and to do and I think to reach our targets.
Yeah, yeah, because again, depends on, we still need to decarbonize. We still need to meet environmental goals. If we continue business as usual, if we just continue growing and consuming demand with the same rate without any advancements in energy efficiency or substitution technologies, then we may have a problem with not having enough supply for oil, right?
Yeah,
So while we're investing in oil, we still need to continue exploring
exactly.
the alternative fuels.
Yeah. And my last question, in your opinion, what the government, or let's say countries, could do to accelerate transition and replace oil?
Yeah, so far, like when we look at the sectorial development, right, we've seen like two distinct pathways. One is driven by technology and actual like consumer, while others is driven by policies. So, and the first one is uh, example of passenger vehicles, right? If there are sustainable or like if there is electric vehicles that can replace traditional ICE vehicle, which has lower cost, which has enough infrastructure that you can probably charge at home, right? Without limiting your travel range or without limiting your, I don't know, family plans, um, that could be a viable solution. And that's what we've seen in China. That's what we've seen in Europe as well and in the US. The growth in the past, let's say in the past few years, slowed down, but before we've seen much higher growth rates, right? While when we look at the maritime industry, there are number of regulations of IMO, yet there is no alternative fuel. And if we look at the pipeline, the majority of the cargo ships are ordered to be delivered in the next few years, again, fossil fuels driven ones. So that's fuel oil, that could be LNG, but we don't see ammonia anymore. We don't see ammonia shipping cargoes at with the same share as we expected before.
Yeah,
So it
so
might
you mean
be,
that we are late? We are late in kind of transition.
yeah, what I'm saying is that despite regulations, if there is no viable, cheap technology, if there is no infrastructure, it's just hard to achieve. It's hard to meet those stringent regulations because the shipping companies, they don't have alternatives. It's either, completely cutting the routes and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
not
yeah.
shipping, or we're not meeting regulations. There are ways probably to reduce carbon emissions with help of carbon capture and other technologies, but other than that, there is no fuel currently, and there is no
Mhm.
fuel in the short term to replace oil that would
Yeah,
have the same energy density, right, and the
yeah.
same cost.
Yeah, exactly. Even when we talk about DAC, direct air carbon, CCS, carbon capture and storage, CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, few countries only in the world they have access to technology and to the investment. But what about the rest of the world? So I think it's not really easy at all to make that energy transition in a very short terms. So many countries put a plan for 2030, but I believe 2030, just 5, 6 years, that's it. So as you mentioned, we don't see cargoes of ammonia, we don't see cargoes of hydrogen, we don't see pipelines of hydrogen. Everybody is talking about hydrogen, but I think it's still struggling because, and I believe the global economic crisis really, let's say, postponed the plans for energy transition because many governments at the moment are struggling with their GDP, with their growth. But adding to that, what we have energy transition commitments with energy transition, and I think the slowing the slow of global economic growth is like hampering the effort to make our target, to achieve our target of energy transition. I have to thank you so much. It was really a pleasure hosting you with me today. Your contribution is really an added value for us, dear Svetlana. And to be honest, it will be more than a pleasure. I will be more than glad to host you in other opportunities.
Thank you so much.